Darlene, are you going to Darlene, are you going to take the podium, or are you going to sit? Good. No, we've got two. One. Nick, we have another mic. Oh, we got mic stands right there. I'm sorry. You'll turn those on. So before I leave the stage, let me introduce the next panel. This is our real estate expert panel. Jesse, you get the mic. Good. Yeah. Again, we talked a little bit about what Darlene is going to do with a real estate advisory council, and extremely competent in all things real estate. She's done almost every job there is in the real estate business. So without further ado, Darlene, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. Let's give a warm welcome.
Quick mic test.
Dunda.
Testing.
Dunda.
So that was pretty cool.
Testing.
Because my son is a baseball player, and his walk-up song was that Thunder?
Yeah. Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck, thank you. So when that came on, I have a picture of my son walking up to the plate. So thank you for that. That was perfect. Rich, I don't know if you had that information. But anyway, so welcome. I'm very excited to be moderating the real estate panel. So my name is Darlene Pope. I'm the CEO of a company called Brava Systems. Brava Systems is actually an AI platform for commercial real estate. But I'm not going to talk about that. What we're going to attempt to do in the next 45 minutes to an hour, because Rich said I can go over time if we need to go over time, is really give you the perspective from the real estate owner, manager perspective in terms of what's required for digital infrastructure in their buildings. And before I do that, I kind of want to set the stage, because when you talk about in-building wireless, and I was the head of the In-Building Wireless Alliance, different organization, back in 2000 to 2005. So we've been having the same conversations for 25 years, literally, in terms of putting DAS systems in buildings and having in-building wireless communications in our buildings. And so if you kind of look at the big picture of real estate and digital infrastructure, and you look at in-building wireless as kind of, let's talk about some concentric circles, and in-building wireless is here. And what Joe was talking about was wireless communications, which could include, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and Zigbee and LoRaWAN, and there are so many other types of wireless communications going on in buildings, whether it's for building systems or sensors under desks or the tenant space has different wireless communications. So there's in-building wireless, there's wireless, and then there's digital infrastructure, and then there's the rest of the world, right? So we're going to jump around when we're referring to wireless. We're going to be talking about broader digital infrastructure for building operations. So I just wanted to set the stage a little bit in terms of the conversation we're going to have. But all of this is really going to be from the perspective of the real estate owner and manager. So hopefully we'll give you some insights on what may be able to help you in terms of when you're working with real estate owners. So with that, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do, and then we'll just launch into some questions. And hopefully we'll have room at the end to take some questions from the audience as well. So we'll start with Jesse.
Hey, thanks, Darlene. Jesse Carrillo, as it says, formerly with Hines. So I was the Chief Information Officer with Hines for about 15 years, and I was with the company for 27. And then I went to work for Howard Hughes for a couple of years as their Chief Innovation Information Officer. But now I'm moved to the mountains of Colorado and doing a lot of hiking and doing advisory services, but always great to come out here and hang out with the old friends and meet new ones. And so I'm going to bring the IT, application programmer geek perspective, having been in this industry for a long time as well.
Great. Ingrid.
Great. Hi, I'm Ingrid Fenn. I am CEO of a company called Sirius. We're a management consulting firm. So we've worked with large enterprise organizations for the last decade on how you think through end-to-end corporate real estate management. So how do you structure your teams internally? How do you partner with service providers in the industry? And then, how to use technology to help support that. So I'll be bringing that perspective here today. Nice to meet you all.
John?
Thank you. I'm with Colliers International, which is a global commercial real estate firm. I handle the Southeast, about 300 million square feet or 1,200 buildings. I'm here seeking solutions for our different groups that are involved, from our tenants to our owners to our own company, and how we utilize that data and wireless within our buildings. What I really do is I connect with people and I solve problems, which it sounds like there's a lot of that in this room. And that's what I really do for a living in commercial real estate space.
Murray.
Thanks. Hi, Murray Green with Green Commercial Real Estate Group. For most of my career, I was working for companies like Colliers, the big third-party management companies, and in 2003 started my own business. So third-party property management, brokerage, leasing, construction management. I'm also a court-appointed receiver. So John could really talk a lot about the perspective from the large real estate firms. Mine is more boutique with small and regional owners and smaller Class B, Class C buildings. So get a perspective of the different types of ownerships and also different types of buildings.
Great, thank you. And I want to point out I met John and Murray at a BOMA Southern Conference 28 years ago in Miami. So that's how long we've known each other and been working in this industry. And John Gilbert, who's going to be the keynote speaker this afternoon, I think we've known each other for, 30 years now? And it's funny because as the other speakers are talking, we're looking at each other going, yep, 30 years of this conversation, yep, 30 years. So anyway, the new buzzword is AI. Obviously, AI is in huge demand now. We see that there are companies that are at the infancy of what they're doing with AI, maybe ChatGPT, and there are other companies that are all in and they really are embracing AI as a way to run their organizations. So what I want to start off with is the conversation about use cases. Because AI can do anything you want it to do as long as it has access to the right data, right? So let me start with the panel, and let's talk about what are the most common use cases that you're seeing that are in demand from the real estate industry. And John, I'm going to start with you. And so recognize John and Murray kind of representing commercial real estate, multi-tenant office buildings. Ingrid's done a lot of work in corporate real estate, so that's more the owner-occupier, large corporate facilities. So I'm going to pose the questions that way if you can give us your perspective there. So John, what are you seeing as the primary use cases in commercial real estate right now for AI?
Well, AI in my world is not AI in your world. What I typically get is when I send reporting into our ownerships, they run it through AI and then they call me with all sorts of questions and say, AI told us and generated this to ask you. And that's not the appropriate use that we're looking for, but in my world, that's what's happening. Tenants are using it in the same type of way. What can we deploy to them? Joe talked about it in his opening presentation, the physical part of it in the buildings, but also connecting our different stakeholders in the building. Again, I mentioned ownership. Our tenants want something different than ownership. And then the building itself requires, and our own company needs, these type of interactions and this type of technology. So from that standpoint, we're not utilizing it in the capacity it should be. I went out and internally in our company, they give us Copilot, and this is not a knock because every other company I talk to, and we're supposed to use that, but there's no genuine training for it or how it applies to our industry. So we're lacking in that. I'm just the person to be out here to tell you that, and we're trying to figure out how to connect those dots.
Yeah, and I think there's also a big difference between AI for your company as a real estate company versus AI for your building versus AI for the tenants in the building. So Murray, from your perspective, like where are you seeing the biggest use cases for AI in real estate?
So again, smaller ownerships, smaller office buildings, boutique tenant in a lot of those buildings. And from our ownership, they're using it more and more, as John said, reporting, trying to get more insight on acquisitions, running more detailed analysis. But I'm not really seeing it implemented in the buildings at this point. We have a lot of disassociated systems in the buildings, and so there's a great opportunity there, but it's really not getting utilized.
I think the word disparate systems has been so overused in the last 10 years, whether it's disparate systems in the buildings, disparate systems in the organization, disparate organizational structure. Ingrid, what are you seeing in corporate real estate in terms of the use of AI and maybe some of the use cases that you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think kind of consistent to what both you said, there's pockets of use cases and reporting comes to mind certainly, but I think for global enterprises, if you take a step back a little bit, and Rich, you kind of made me chuckle earlier, but we talk about connectivity, and generally I think enterprises feel they have connectivity across their portfolios, but consistent and integrated digital infrastructure, which really is ultimately the enabler of AI, that's still, really lacking. And if you think about from use types or space types and the maturity of space or where they're located, whether you're in a city center or in a more a disparate location outside in suburbia, or if you're just talking about regionally, right, from country to country, you're going to have further complications in being able to have that level of connectivity. So I think from an AI perspective, organizations are still thinking on how do we start to think about integrated data and what that looks like, then that will ultimately drive the AI strategies for them.
Great. So Jesse, you have the unique advantage of being the IT guy in the real estate community or in the real estate business. And John and I were talking earlier about you've probably lived through this whole evolution of high-speed internet in the 90s, smart buildings in the 2000s, and now AI. So from your perspective, what are you seeing are the use cases? Where are you seeing AI really changing the way that real estate owners think about digital infrastructure and telecom in the buildings?
Well, I did stand in line for the first iPhone, so I definitely love the iPhone. No, I think for me it's, again, and I'll talk about a couple examples, but I think it's like we've all gone through these waves, and whether it's connectivity, whether it's IT, data, we've all gone through these waves. But I think for me what's cool is when it's bottom up. Like the reason I get excited about the iPhone is because it was the consumer that changed the world, right? You put this phone in their hands, and all of a sudden they wanted apps, they wanted data, they wanted everything. And so it forced a lot of us in IT that we were trying to get these systems deployed in this industry, and we were having trouble. And all of a sudden this iPhone shows up, and then all of a sudden we're able to do a lot more that we wanted to do from an IT perspective. And so I'm sensing that again. We went through a small data wave, but this whole AI, OpenAI, ChatGPT, the graph that showed that not even a hockey stick, it was almost like a rocket ship of the number of users that are on ChatGPT, is I think what gets me excited as an IT guy, because you need stuff like that to push the industry. You need stuff like that to get us excited. And it doesn't come from top down. It doesn't come from a mandate from the CEO, from the president. It comes from bottom up. And so the last wave that I saw like this was the iPhone and the mobile devices. And so I get excited as an IT guy from the standpoint of AI is not going anywhere. I mean, this is for real, and we just need to figure out how to start using it more in our organizations. I'll give you a couple examples, and we used to call it OCR, optical character recognition, and we used to call it OCR on steroids. We have so much paper, so many documents, so many contracts in this industry, and for years we've all been chasing that OCR on steroids. I mean, we tried pilots in the early 2000s, in the mid, 2010, 12, and now to have something like AI that can really do real OCR is amazing. And so, I'll mention a couple of projects, and we started this at Hines, but then I left Hines. But at Howard Hughes, it was a public company, and so we used to spend a lot of time on our 10Ks and our 10Qs, our quarterly reports and our annual reports, because we were, SEC filing. And so we spent a lot of time, and a lot of times those reports very similar, but they just needed a little bit of tweaks. And so one of the things that we tried, we were doing right before I left, is we implemented OpenAI. We brought it in-house because we didn't want to expose our data. One of the things that I try to tell folks is play around with ChatGPT, play around with Claude, play around with these tools, but don't play with your company's data. Play with your own personal data if you want to put it out there, but don't start putting your reports and your information that you're gathering from internal. And so we wanted to streamline that whole process. So we built our own internal OpenAI, not hard to do. Get your IT teams to help you. And then we started pumping all our public records into there, just in case we accidentally leaked something, but it was all public information. And it was amazing after we fed it, 3, 4, 5 years worth of 10Ks and 10Qs. It was probably 80, 85, 90% accurate the next time it generated one. And so the amount of time that we were looking at saving people's time was going to be incredible. So I would say go back to old school. Go OCR, go to your documents, go to your leases. That's the kind of stuff that you can try to get up and running very quickly, and you start seeing results, and the results you can verify. Trust and verify. So those are some prime examples. We were doing a lot with leasing as well. Mm-hmm. But those are two good examples. Don't forget about all that paperwork you guys have and all those reports. Start maybe with that.
Yeah. So it used to be that real estate was all about location. And now it seems like it's all about data. So Ingrid, as a consultant and working with a lot of real estate companies, talk to us a little bit about the importance of data and clean data and structured data and kind of where do you start to even get your arms around what data you need and what you need to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has probably been a conversation that's been going on for over a decade of how do we get our data right. But it is a real challenge, right? And as companies go from more localized models, because I mean, we work with organizations that are, if you think like the manufacturing industrial environment, it's still very local and decisions are made at the building level, and how people make investments in building infrastructure is made, very much from that perspective, to tech and, the finance environments where it's much more integrated corporate decision making. But I think, ultimately the mechanisms from a large global corporate perspective and making sure that data is consistent across the globe, from building to building, those are very difficult today. And most often companies are relying on external service providers and their technology tools to help them to do that. And I think, it's really one of the biggest areas we're still helping to advise in, because it's going to be a big limiting factor. We see it already, even in just integrated, simple technology systems across, if you think about the manufacturing environment, they're still at a point where there might be 10 different CMMS systems across 20 locations, right? So the levels of maturity, and when you think about the challenges with data, I think are still, very complex and vast from company to company.
And they estimate that 80 to 90% of a company's data is unstructured data, and so it's in PowerPoints, it's in emails, it's in things that you really need to convert into structured data sets to begin with. What do you do to advise your clients on where to start in that whole process?
Well, I think similar to what you said about AI starting at the bottom, I think really the needs of the employer are starting to drive that a little bit. And I think to your point, COVID kind of has elevated or rapidly accelerated that concept of, when people were working from home, we tend to, in our personal life, have a lot more connectivity with the way we use technology, with our home, with our personal life, et cetera. But, then coming back into the office, employees were expecting that. So I think the amenity side of using AI and getting data right is really driving some of those accelerations more so, frankly, than the building side, where you would think, the implications from a risk and a financial are even greater. But
So John, I know that there's literally terabytes of data, maybe mega terabytes of data. I don't know what the word is beyond terabytes, but there's so much data going on in commercial buildings. Can you kind of give the audience an idea of what are all the different data sets that you need to be aware of and manage and transport and communicate with, above and beyond cell phone usage, for tenants? So just give them an idea of the vast amount of data and communications that are needed to run a building.
Yeah, and Murray can jump in on that too, in case I miss. And Jesse talked about it. Leases is one of our legal determination in anything that's lawful in our buildings. So leases need to be the first one. I'm not seeing that implemented across the board. Some of our ownerships want to do it. Some of our ownerships at this time are not wanting to do it at the time. The building produces a mass amount of data, and Joe mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the physical AI part of the building. Something as simple as when a person gets warm in the air conditioning, that generates a work order that they put in online, and that goes through so many different systems before the end result occurs, and all this can be streamlined in that, and then a data bank for the problems. And to your point, we can use that for predictive maintenance and other things doing that. We're doing none of that right now at this point in time, and all the building systems that are tied into it, whether it's a building management system or it's in our financial operatives, none of that is connecting together. Should we be able to pull that together and be able to do the budgets based on, period before? The answer is correct. We're still all doing that manually through a lot of different gyrations and different programming. You want to add to that, Mary?
Yeah, I'll get to with the building systems. It's not just the building systems talking to your accounting systems, and it's the building systems talking to each other. Where because of proprietary systems or there's no integration of that, and so building a platform where my building automation system, the elevators, fire system, HVAC system, security system are all working together and coordinated can generate a lot more efficiency, but also reduce costs. And again, we're looking at in buildings that we manage for owners, this is an investment for them. So they're looking on that return or what John and I talk about all the time, that value proposition. So it's got to generate income, or it's going to generate value where I can attract a tenant more than the building down the street can attract a tenant, or charge higher rents than the building down the street. So there's got to be a value proposition in there for real estate investors who own multi-tenant office buildings to implement these types of things. So we've got to, as managers, it's our job to try to show them where that value proposition is, and this is where we need that type of input to get that.
Yeah, just to add one thing, Rich brought it up when he was up here and we were doing the fireside chat. There's a reduction of expenses we're supposed to accomplish for value proposition, and then an increase in revenue. And I think that is some of the conflict in how we generate in the AI applications. Because if we can lower expenses, that does increase the value proposition on the building for our clients, and at the same time, as well as using different data sets to create better and more valuable data.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention one comment about structured and unstructured data. And so back in the day, if you think about filters on a website, or filters, you're trying to filter the city, you're trying to filter the type of building, the asset class, you had to structure your data. You had to go in the system and tell it, this is a commercial office building, this is a residential building, this is a location here, this is a location there, so you had to tell the system, you had to tell the data. You had, metadata, tag, whatever you need to do the filters. The cool thing about AI is you don't need to do that anymore, right? I mean, the language models will learn that for you, so you don't have to tell it. And that's where I get excited about the acceleration, because, at Hines, we spent 8 to 10 years building out a global data hub, collecting all the data, tagging it, checking it, writing reports. And then to think that in less than 2 to 3 months, you can do all that with AI, with the right models, with the right partners, is exciting. So even all this data we're collecting at the buildings with sensors, you don't have to do what we used to do in the old days. Let the language models learn your building, let the language models do the work for you, and that accelerates the speed. So I think we still talk about structured and unstructured, but the structured data doesn't matter as much in the AI world.
Can I ask Jesse a question?
Certainly. Go ahead. You want to come up here? No.
No. But Jesse, does that create a personality for the building? Because in our world, buildings have a personality. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, again, I think personality.
Yeah.
I don't think it can create a personality yet, but I think it's like everything else. It's like, AI is the same thing. It's like children. You can teach a child to think left. You can teach a child to think right. With the models, you can jade them, of course, and that's the danger. I think that's the danger zone. But no, it doesn't create a personality. It can only tell you what's reality in that building. But to me, it's more about the speed, not necessarily about changing the dynamic of the building. It's about the speed. I think too many times we don't know where to start. We don't know how to start. And then we see this, there's that saying about the elephant, right? One piece at a time. And so when you think about an AI journey and you think about getting started, when you say about trillion amounts of data points and all that, people just take a step back and say, well, never mind, it's going to cost a lot, take a lot of time. I think when I do some advisory work and I try to show them just how quickly they can get AI into their environment, just how quickly AI can actually do something for you, they get surprised. And I think that's the big thing as a technology person that I get excited about this new wave, is it is about the speed, how fast you can implement something. But no, it won't change the personality anytime soon, and I hope not, because I want my buildings to still need humans. I want humans still to be able to make some of these decisions. I don't want the Terminator world yet.
Well, I think this is a great segue into talking about smart buildings. And I spent about 20 years as a smart building consultant, including my own firm for a while, and then we got bought by JLL. And so I ran smart buildings for JLL and for WeWork. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think that AI is going to have a huge impact on smart buildings and all the things that we've been trying to do with smart buildings over the last couple of decades. Did all of you see the announcement this week, NVIDIA and Siemens partnership? Raise your hand if you saw that. Okay, a couple of you. I thought it was very timely, especially because of our opening presentation today. So there was an announcement about this new partnership between NVIDIA and Siemens that they are building the industrial AI operating system, which is redefining how the physical world is designed, built, and run. It combines NVIDIA's leadership in computing and AI with Siemens hardware, software, and operational data. And then this will allow us to support digital twins, as you heard about a little bit earlier, intuitive buildings, energy management, sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So let's flip to the conversation a little bit about smart buildings. Ingrid, if you want to start, tell us a little bit about what you think this, especially this new partnership between NVIDIA and Siemens is kind of a building operating, manufacturer. Like, what does that mean, and where do you see AI going in terms of driving the smart building conversation?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll take it from a little bit of a different perspective, but I think it's going to really depend on also the way that the investment is, the ROI on investment is played out, because in our experience, a lot of conversations on smart buildings is still largely being stalled by where is that money coming from? How do we think about, if you're head of CRE, you're thinking about capital cycles. If you're tech, you're thinking about it from an operating expense perspective. If you're thinking about a lease location, you're going to talk about and contemplate what the landlord's investment is going to be into that. So, when we think about it from an enterprise perspective, because, I don't get heavily involved into the technical side of that, but it's really about, making those decisions about where it makes sense to invest in smart buildings, and then how does that look as you integrate that across the portfolio, and really what benefit you're going to get from that, and how does that align with the business decision. So I think it also might be looking at it from an industry to industry perspective too.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part of this conversation is what is the value proposition and what is the ROI, and if a real estate owner is going to invest in something, where are they going to invest and what's the return? And Joe even mentioned this morning that they were way ahead, and that the industry wasn't ready because there was no pull from the industry needing the technology that's available. So John, do you want to maybe address that a little bit in terms of commercial real estate? And is there a pull? Is there a pull for the need for AI or for smart buildings or for bigger highways for all this data? Like, where do you see the pull from commercial real estate?
Well, I handle a lot of work with Siemens, and I happen to know one of their global IT gentlemen who's been involved with this deal, and I think it's the forefront of what's going to change the real estate industry. What they've talked about is encompassing all of their ownership entities together, utilizing AI through their reporting cycles, through the maintenance, the building, the physical aspect along with its tenancy, and to streamline all of this and be able to make deals and do deals, obviously online through cycles, as you were mentioning with the other groups involved. So I think corporate real estate is testing this theory out right now, and Siemens seems to be the one who's the front runner in trying to use edge, and I heard Joe mention that. That's discussed with them a lot right now, and that's what they're trying to capture, what that value will be and what that looks like coming back to Siemens. That's the part where they're not quite sure where that end is. What is the value proposition whole? But they're moving forward, and they're trying to make different streams of value come into it. So it's not about one stream. We all think about that way. We're talking about wireless, and instead it's how many streams, how scalable is it? And Siemens is trying to figure that out right now. They seem to be able to have, from my understanding, in their IT department, and Jesse may know more about this, but they have a global system that was able to be used as a platform for this, and now they're trying to monetize it. So,
And when you talk about AI at the edge, I mean, in buildings, you've got so many different edge devices, and whether it's VAV boxes or temperature sensors or lighting sensors or occupancy sensors, I mean, there's so many different devices that need to be connected. So Murray, talk to us a little bit about what is the building owner's responsibility in terms of making sure you have the proper digital infrastructure to support all of these IoT devices and in-building connectivity. What's the building owner's responsibility?
Well, you're talking about the pull, and a lot of that is what our tenants want. And so we're always looking for to make sure we have what the tenants will need in the future, not just what they need today. And a lot of it comes down to we don't know what we don't know. And so a lot of, especially the ownerships that I deal with, who are not the big institutional owners that are very sophisticated and probably implementing some of this internally, they're looking around saying, what do we need to do and how do we need to do it? Some of this originally is hitting them from the leasing and brokerage side, where they're using a lot of the AI to generate what the space can look like for a tenant based on what that tenant does. And so they're using that as a sales pitch for prospective tenants. And so ownerships are now seeing that, and it's kind of the light bulb starting to go off for them. So a lot of it is just education to the ownerships and the asset managers on, they have no idea what the capabilities are, what it unlocks for them. And so it's more about bringing them the tools and the understanding of what these type of things can do. From the operational side, the buildings, we're looking at it as all these IoT devices out there. Yeah, we're getting that data. How do we utilize that data? Our building engineers don't have a lot of the times the education and the experience and the knowledge on how to utilize all this stuff. So we got a big experience and education gap there where they're hands-on people. And so being able to adapt them to the AI environment as well is that next challenge on that side.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into talking about one of the other use cases is maintenance of buildings, whether it's facility management in corporate facilities, property management in multi-tenant buildings, and the need for your personnel to have seamless connectivity and be able to have access to important data in a millisecond, and also being able to use AI to maybe diagnose a problem, or how many times have we had an issue with the same chiller or whatever. So Murray, talk to us a little bit about where you see AI and connectivity really impacting the maintenance side of buildings.
Well, the connectivity is a big thing because there's still lots of times you go into buildings and you get to a certain part of the building, whether it's in an elevator, part of the parking garage, or just somewhere in the building, oh, I got no signal. So you can't implement any of this higher level stuff unless there's connectivity. So that's baseline number one, is you got to have connectivity throughout the entire building. And then it's giving them the educational tools to be able to then access the data that they need. But again, the first thing is you got to be connected.
Yeah, and I will say for the record, it still blows my mind that you can go into a Class A office building and lose your cell phone signal when you get in the elevator or drive into the parking garage. But that's a whole nother conversation. I think it's also different when you're in New York City in a 100-story building, or Chicago versus suburban office parks where you don't have the same type of connectivity issues. And we talked about this a little bit on our prep call, which is the difference between the types of assets that we're talking about, and whether they're office buildings or hospitals or sporting arenas. So John, talk to us a little bit about the difference in the facility itself that's going to change the conversation around what type of AI are we, what type of AI applications do we need? What type of connectivity do we need? So talk a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things, just going back to the previous question, is we put in 3,000% more sensors in the 2000s than we did previously. So there's a lot more data to collect, but they weren't connected into a system that is collecting all that. So I just wanted to make that note. That's the first thing we need to do, is connect all of the sensors before we add anything and start collecting the data, refining it, and to filter it. And then the different assets are going to have different owners. So we operate on a scale of buildings A to F. F doesn't exist, meaning you're going to knock it down and rebuild it. That's an easy one. We want to build to the new levels. And we keep hearing about 6G. That's one of my questions. Should we be building to that level? Not for this panel. But yeah, we have to go into a retail center where the tenants themselves occupy the space, manage their space, and anything that data that's in that space is theirs. Anything on the exterior is going to be ownerships. In some places, in our government buildings, all of it goes to the GSA or whatever the government entity. We have so many different data people inside of our buildings. That's one of our issues, is how do we collect this data? How do we filter the data? How do we secure it for those who don't want their data share, and share for those who want it shared? So whether it's a public pier like in St. Pete that I worked on, where we were trying to put data access for these mobile vendors that go around, all of these are critical issues for us. So each building has, and I mentioned personality before, because each building has its own personality of how it runs, not necessarily how it's structured or its platform. And keeping that personality alive for, say, the pier, you don't want it to change from the open public space and the freedom people feel there with whatever you do. In office buildings, you may change the personality by whatever you put into it. So Buildings have differences. The A-class buildings, those are your downtown core buildings, whether it's retail, office, or industrial. They have the top-of-the-line equipment. Hines is a good example of that. They build in the cores. And those buildings have all sorts of availability and probably are easier to upgrade than others. Once you get below the B level of buildings, none of it exists. And you probably don't have many sensors either. So that's the heavier lift in our industry.
So Ingrid, from a corporate real estate perspective, and recognize, commercial real estate, multi-tenant, you got all kinds of different priorities and different budgets and stuff going on. Corporate facilities, on the other hand, is owner-occupied. So is it a much different conversation when you're working with corporate owners in terms of what type of digital infrastructure they need, the use cases, and if you could also touch on facility management and what are some of the applications for AI and facility management in a corporate environment?
Yeah, so mostly in a corporate environment, I think you have a pretty broad mix of a portfolio. So typically it's around 60% leased and 40% owned. But you're looking at also like very different types of space, and then the use case for those being very different. And a couple good comments made. So as tech changes and how we're looking at maintenance within the building changes, I think the operators and the level of sophistication of the people actually maintaining the spaces is not necessarily keeping up to speed. So we're doing a lot of work around how do you bring the right training programs in place for the use of new technology, for how do you translate that technology into meaningful data. So that's certainly one aspect of it. And then again, decisions on capital and who's going to be covering that and where companies are going to actually be spending that money is going to be different if you're thinking about a space, Blackstone in New York City versus someone out in a smaller market where it's going to, the infrastructure might be coming from an entirely different place, number one, but the access or leverage you have with a landlord might be entirely different of how you're doing those negotiations. So I think that all of those kind of are compounding factors.
And a couple of you have touched on the skills gap. So let's drill into that a little bit more in terms of the way that buildings are operated and run. Is typically a traditional workforce of MEPs that may not be your data analysts and your AI experts. Now, with the exception of Jesse, and Jesse being the IT guy from the real estate side, talk to us a little bit about the skills gap. I mean, there was a comment earlier that AI should be happening behind the scenes and enabling the end users without necessarily having to know how it works, right? So how can AI either help or hurt this kind of traditional conservative engineering group, if you will, that has that skills gap? You think it will help or hurt?
Well, and again, time passes, things shift, and I think you're starting to see a new generation of engineering folks that are coming up with this technology, and they grew up with this technology, right? And so they're not afraid of the technology, and so they're embracing it. And I think that's the big difference you're seeing at the building level. We struggled for a lot of years trying to get technology into the buildings because we had really good engineers, and they could hear a noise and tell you what it was. They could see something and tell you what they think was happening. They were very predictive because they had the brains. But those engineers started to retire, started to move on, and then you had a new wave of engineers that didn't have that experience. And so I think you're starting to see the new engineers come in with that mindset of, let me find those tools that are going to make my life easier. I want to go hiking. I want to go spend time with my family. I don't want to be on a pager back in the old days with the pagers for 24/7, right? And so I think you're starting to see them appreciate the technology and want to bring it in. And so there's still that little struggle because you have the changing of the guard. But I think you're going to see a lot of these engineers come in. They're going to come in from IT backgrounds. They're going to come in with analyst backgrounds because they're not going to be turning as many wrenches as they used to. Because they're going to have a lot more physical sensors and things that are going to help you. So I do see that shift, and I agree. I mean, the cool thing about AI is the prompts. Like I can tell you, I was working with some startups in the architecture, engineering, and construction industries, and they were coming with some technology that says, I need a 100,000 square foot building, 12 floors. I want this side to face the east side, and I want each floor to have 9 foot ceilings, blah 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 blah. And they just typed it in English, and all of a sudden here comes this diagram, this Revy model, AutoCAD model that comes out, and it's there, and it's like 90% good. And all they did was just tell it what they wanted. And so again, I don't think you really need to understand how AI works You know, I still don't understand how iPhone works 100%, but I use it all the time. And so I think, you know, we don't need to understand it. We just know and be able to trust it. And I think at some point you're going to trust it just like driverless vehicles. We're starting to trust it. We're starting to trust it. And at some point it becomes the norm and you don't need to understand. I think the new engineers are coming in with that it works, let me do it, let me try it.
So, you know, we've heard this term digital twins in the industry for probably 10 or 15 years now, right? And we saw it again today. We saw a little video of what a digital twin is. So in your experience, have you actually seen the application of a digital twin for a building? And if not, when do you think that's actually going to become a reality?
I mean, I've seen it because we did it at a couple buildings in Hines, and then I saw some of my peers do it at their companies. So yeah, so it works. I mean, you saw the example that was given up here, so it does work. I mean, you can try things. You know, you can change settings, you can try this, and you can do it virtually and see the results and say, okay, that didn't work. We're going to start the building on fire. Don't do that, right? So it does work. It's like VR goggles and all that. It does work, but it does take time, and it does take trust, and it does take cost. Unfortunately, you know, the cost was very high early on. I think today, because of AI and some of the things we've learned over the years, you can do virtual, you know, twins a lot, or digital twins a lot easier now, less cost. But I still think the trust factor and folks wanting to give it a shot and letting it do its job, I think is still something we need to learn, but it's getting better.
Mm-hmm. So Ingrid, have you seen it in corporate real estate? I mean, I know background in UTC, were you able to actually deliver digital twins?
One, I think, kind of cool example was we were working with Google, and we did a whole kind of digital twin type situation of a day of a life of a Googler. So it went from starting from before they even entered campus, but at home, what was what did your day look like to get to work from the moment you woke up and got out of bed to transportation through to, you know, breakfast when you entered the building to how you were greeted to, et cetera, throughout the whole day. And so they did a virtual kind of mapping of that to help them explore a variety of different things, but around the transportation study, food studies, the way people, in Google in particular, the engineers don't have like set environments that they work. Depending on different projects, they'll migrate around the campuses in different ways. So they were looking at the, you know, how that was working and where the efficiencies could be made and things like that. So that was a very interesting study that was around that.
Great. John, are you doing anything with digital
I was just going to
twins?
add too, you talk about the trust factor. There's also a fear factor.
Sure.
You know, you know, will it go so badly that it really messes things up? Or the other side of that fear factor is, if I really embrace this, am I going to be out of a job? Mm-hmm. Because AI is going to take over and you're not going to need me anymore. So again, it's that learning process and getting to the trust more than the fear.
So playing off of all of the comments so far, we already do twinning, but we do it in our financial components. We mirror our financial components because that's the most valuable thing to our ownership. So I do that in a lot of data already. We're just going to extend that to the building at this time. And that's what I use to talk to them about. Why do you mirror your data? To make sure it doesn't get corrupted and you can compare it to something else. They understand that, and so I think that's one of the pathways into us getting to be able to do this type of twinning, because I built 2 different buildings to twin them with different equipment in them in Miami and Waterford at Blue Lagoon, when we had to do it in a physical approach in the 90s because we didn't know how this model would work out with this model. And so I think there's the pathway is there, we just have to show the trust behind it.
Great.
You've been in the design world as well.
Yeah, and design world, yeah, it's quite a bit.
All right, let's take a couple of questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap up with kind of what's the killer app that you think is going to be the big, you know, wow to really drive AI adoption in buildings. So questions for our panelists. Oh. Okay.
The practical element of all this is you guys have, you know, you're the core of the real estate expertise here at this event. But as we talked about with Joe, when someone from the audience who's a vendor comes to you, and John, you were very open, you're looking for solutions. What is it that people like you need to hear from them rather than, you know, I've got a widget here, you want to buy it? Or do we need to, you know, listen first, see what you need, and how should they approach that with you guys?
So,
If you wouldn't mind just going down the whole row.
sure.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Go ahead. Well, the first thing I would say is, before that vendor even approaches me, take some time to learn our business. Learn a little bit about how we do things. We talked a little bit about that today, about different types of buildings, different types of ownerships, multi-tenant facilities, where it's owner-occupied, retail, healthcare. Understand a little bit more about what our pressures are and what we have to deal with. So you're coming to us with a little bit of understanding. We're not just looking for that widget. We're looking for solutions. And so how do your solutions fit with what we're trying to accomplish between our ownership, our management, and our tenants?
Yeah, I agree with Murray, and my big word is listen. I used this example last night. So I was on public-private partnership with Department of Energy for 15 years, and we were trying to deploy LED bulbs to the masses because nobody would buy them. Everybody was still buying the old bulbs, and we couldn't get them to save energy. And what I found out is that the labs were working towards winning a prize internally for the best bulb, not for what people wanted in the marketplace. So I went to all the different labs and different marketplace. We found out what they were really looking for is to understand what it was, why it cost more, and how long it would last, or the value proposition. And once we did that, and then we started putting out what people wanted, bulbs that could change colors, which LED hit the market on, and as we all know, the deployable factor you mentioned, that is what we try to do.
So I spend a big part of my time being a bit of a marriage counselor to big corporations and their strategic partners. And I think, most often we find that one, know what you're buying and understand what it is, the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, because oftentimes what a buyer buys isn't what it is that is aligned to what they're trying to achieve. So understanding what it is that you want and making sure outcomes are aligned, and then really trying as much as possible to design contracts and the way you pay for services to eliminate what I would call perverse incentives. But oftentimes service providers are paid in a way that is directly aligned with going against what they're trying to accomplish for a client. So example, if you are paid based on a markup on spend, but the goal of the end user is to reduce cost, your profit margin is impaired every time you do that, and therefore you're misincentive to do it. There's thousands of examples like that, but I think those are the things that most often create the biggest misalignment, or the need, or the reality that the client will go back out to the market consistently instead of really see you as a strategic partner.
So if you have a hammer, every problem is a nail, is what you're saying.
I would also add, too, that, Joe's presentation was phenomenal. A lot of that was right here for me, because that's not our industry. So, you're trying to come and sell us something. There's got to be a level of as a customer, what does that customer understand, what they don't understand, and bring that conversation to that level.
Yep. Features, benefits.
Yeah. Jesse, do you have anything to add?
No, it's been said. I used to tell my vendor partners, just don't tell me you can do it all, and don't tell me you know it all, because I know I don't know it all, I can't do it all. So don't try to tell me you can do it all. Really identify that niche, that entry point, what the team said here. Every company out there has one or two things that they do really well. I use sports analogies all the time. If you're good at bunting, I'm going to put you and I'm going to bunt when I need you to bunt. I don't care if you want to swing away, but I'm going to put you to bunt because you're good at that. And I think every company's good at a few things. Just come to me with what you think is your sweet spots, and let's see if there's an alignment there. And if there's other services we can get, wonderful, but don't come to me with, I can do it all and I can solve all your problems, because that's not reality.
Darlene, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, too.
Oh, you don't have enough time for that. No, I would 100% agree. Is you have to understand their business, and having been a consultant in that business, really learning and listening to what their needs are. The highest demand in real estate right now is occupancy detection, because everybody's trying to figure out post-COVID how many people are coming back to the office. In a corporate real estate environment, it's a matter of, do I have too much space? Are my corporate facilities 30% utilized or 10% utilized, or is it more on Mondays and Fridays and Wednesdays? How do I run the building more efficiently when the building's only 10% occupied versus 90% occupied, right? These are the kind of things that are really on the forefront of the real estate mind right now is how do I get more people to come back and use my product? How do I get them back into the office post-COVID? Because how many of you work in a hybrid environment? You know, how many of you so how many of you work hybrid? Sometimes you go in, sometimes you work from home. How many of you work 100% in an office building all the time? How many of you work 100% at home all the time? Right? So this is what the industry's trying to figure out. What is the demand for our product, right? And that's why there's sensors under desks and sensors in ceilings, which drives me crazy. Rich he regrets that he asked me this question, but everybody on the planet is walking around with an occupancy detection device in their pocket, and we're sticking sensors under desks to count how many people are in the office. And so when you talk about in-building wireless, and you guys want to have a use case to go in and sell to building owners, it's occupancy detection. Right? And then you get into location-based services, and we have location-based services outside the building, but we don't have location-based services inside the building. And you can order an Uber, and the Uber knows where you are, but you go into an office building, and you can't find the men's room, or you can't find the conference room. You know, you go at home, and you can adjust your temperature by telling Alexa to turn the heat up, but you go into an office building, and you're freezing to death, instead of picking up your phone and adjusting the temperature on your phone. Anyway, there's a whole nother conference I could go off on that for a very, very long time, but thank you for teeing that up for me. Anyway, just closing thoughts from the panel. You know, what do you think is the big killer app? Like, from your perspective, what are you buying? What are your clients buying? Like, what is the big killer app now, driven by AI, that you think is going to be the next big thing? So, Jesse, we'll start with you.
Lottery pick 6. Like, there's no reason why AI cannot tell me what my next 6 numbers should be when I go to the next store. So, no, I mean, I think, again, there's so much out there right now, and again, you go to the app stores, both, doesn't matter if you're Google or Apple, but there's AI everything now. And so I think the key thing for me is making sure that in commercial real estate, that yes, I want it to be bottom up. I want consumers to be bringing some of these ideas, but you also have to be wary of there's so many stuff out there. So I think to me the killer app is still around efficiency, right? I mean, again, I go back to what we tried at Hines and at Howard Hughes. We shuffle our processes. We have so many manual processes in our industry. So I still think the killer app is how do you streamline some of these processes, contracts, documents, leases. It sounds boring. It sounds simple, but we still, again, we've all been in this industry a long time. We've been talking about it for a long time. We still haven't solved it, but I think with AI we can get a lot closer. So I still think go back to your processes and figure out what you can do internally, to help yourself out. And I think that's where it's going to be. But that and the avatars, I love the avatars. Those are so cool. But I think to me it's boring, and I'm an IT guy, and I like to geek out on the latest technology. I've got all the latest VR stuff. But for commercial real estate, we still have some of those basics that haven't been covered. So I still think your process improvements is number one.
Ingrid.
I'm just hearing you say you want to get rid of the lawyers.
We all do.
But we do a lot of legal work, and that definitely does help a lot, the use of AI. But I think the ones that are most exciting to think about as far as corporate office space and the corporate end user are those that are really going to connect your entire experience as you go into an office. And there's, stories about pilots of ones now where it's predicting everything from the moment you enter, and it's going to, select the elevator for you, and it's going to tell you where to go to the right space where you're not going to freeze in the office because I like it really warm and someone else likes it really cold. And so I think that as those types of apps emerge, that really connects your day and the way you interact with people in the space, I think that will be very exciting.
John?
So I'm really not the killer app guy. And I go back to Windows 95. Remember, start me up, and we're going to be paperless society by 2000, and we're not there yet. I'm more about the transparency in all of this, from all of our vendor partners to the building owners to the tenants and to us who manage these things. Transparency throughout this process will drive it in the marketplace. Mistrust will not. And so I'm looking for all of us to integrate more, talk more, and figure out what are the best pathways to deploy this type of technology in our projects.
Well put.
Hurry.
Yeah, I think, so if I want to see what's going on in one of my buildings, I got to go to one app that's got the cameras, and if I want to see temperatures and what's going on, I got to go to a different app. So something that kind of combines all of that, where one-stop shop type of thing. On a personal note, I think the best app out there is the one where you get a picture of somebody and there's somebody in the background you don't want in there. You just do like this and it erases them. That's phenomenal. I love that. Take something that would have been a great picture, except somebody in there that's not supposed to be there, and make them disappear.
I like that.
Yes, very quick question, yes.
Real quick question. We all talk about digital connectivity. We talk about having no signal in the parking area. We talk about no signal in the elevator. And we're all about making sure that you have that, right? So as you're planning for your buildings that you're managing and you're operating, how are you building your capital budget to get that connectivity? And how far ahead are you doing that? Are you prioritizing buildings? If you're not doing that, how can we help?
And I think that's such a great question. And who owns doing that also? Because, and a lot of times in a corporate environment, you're partnering with a service provider who's supposed to be helping you understand those specs and things like that. And I think that's very still ambiguous in the industry and who's kind of making those decisions. And I think an expert coming in and making sure whoever the end user is really thinking through those things and the future implications would be hugely helpful, because I think there's assumption that people are on top of it and have full understanding, and corporate real estate organizations in particular, that might not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, and the question that I'd get asked by my asset managers, is it an inconvenience or is it a problem? And if it's just an inconvenience, they're not going to do anything about it. But if it's a problem, if tenants start complaining about it, if there's something we're trying to accomplish that we can't accomplish because of it, then it becomes a problem, and it's something I can sell to them. So if they're going to spend money on it, it's got to be a problem. It's not an inconvenience.
Number one driver for commercial real estate is going to be demand from tenants. Period. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much. I know you said I could go to 3. I went till 2:58, so I got 2 minutes to spare. But please join me in thanking our panelists for the conversation this afternoon.
Hey, Darlene, stay.
Can we also do a picture? I wanted to have John in there.
Say again?
We'll do a picture later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.